Invisible Man was published by Ralph Ellison in 1952. The book combats themes like blindness, racism, invisibility, and details the life of a nameless man as he goes through many experiences from attending a college in the South to encountering the politics of 1950s Harlem. Upon Invisible Man's release, it gained immediate success. To understand its success more clearly, we will attempt to answer the question, how did Invisible Man shape the topic of race in our culture? To give a background of Black literature before the book's 1952 release, the collection of books tackling racism was a lot more sparse than it is today. Looking to past critically acclaimed books on race, the two standing out the most before Invisible Man's release was Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, published in 1937, and Robert Wright's Native Son, published in 1940. However, there is a difference that can be seen between these books and Ellison's Invisible Man. Native Son, for example, told the story of Bigger Thomas, a 20-year-old black man living in the south side of Chicago. Although Wright was one of the most prominent black writers of his time, critics were quick to note that Bigger was seen more as a stereotype than a real character. Then came the release of Invisible Man. This changed the black protagonist's narrative. The nameless main character of the book was multidimensional. He was self-aware, educated, and sought to find the truth in a world that was heavily masked. Because of this diversion from the typical black protagonist, critics loved this Invisible Man. A review by Sawfellow, a Pulitzer Prize winner from June 1952, commented that Mr. Ellison has not adopted a minority tone. If he had done so, he would have failed to establish a true middle of consciences for everyone. A review by George Mayberry, writer of The New Republic, described the book as one showing up the racial and political cliches that have encumbered the Negro novel. Another review by New York Times writer Orville Prescott says the novel is the most impressive work of fiction by an American Negro which I have ever read. He is not interested in literal, realistic truth, but in an emotional, atmospheric truth. With the praise Invisible Man received, the book ended up winning the U.S. National Book Award in 1953, consequently being the first and only black American to ever receive this honor. The book also got its fair share of criticism. Many critics were quick to nitpick the book's flaws, describing it as overly hysterical and overwhelming. In response to Ellison's award, a Pulitzer fiction juror, who believed the award was wrongly earned, said the book leaves a terrible taste in the mouth, not because it gives a disagreeable picture, but because it shies away from the known truths. Criticism also came from Irving Howe, who said the tempo of the book is too feverish, and at times almost hysterical. Too often he tries to overwhelm the reader, when he should be persuading or suggesting or simply telling. He forced the tears. Equally disturbing is Ellison's apparent wish to be intellectually up to date. As you can see, at the release of Invisible Man, there was a fair share of both proponents and opponents. However, there was a clear understanding that the book provided a new conversation for people to think about, and provided a pathway of thought that African Americans could discover to understand the world more clearly, straying from traditional ideas.
Now, there are many more race-related books in mainstream culture. This includes books like To Kill a Mockingbird, which shares many connections to Invisible Man, The Bluest Eye, The New Jim Crow, and The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Ellison's book lately had an influence on this. Through creating a critically acclaimed book on the basis of racism, he opened up other authors to voice their opinions and create books of their own. The book also continues to gain acclaim, like in 1965 when 200 authors, editors, and critics, polled by the New York Herald Tribune, picked Invisible Man as the most distinguished novel written by an American during the previous 20 years. In more recent years, the impact of the book has even taken several different forms, the first being with arts. The book first influenced Kerry James Marshall's 1980 painting, A Portrait of the Artist as a Shadow of His Former Self. Marshall stated that he was directly influenced by the book and wanted to allude to it by defining the political notion that visibility and invisibility is the strongest tool of power. Then in 2000, photographer Jeff Wall elaborately staged the prologue scene of the book in his photograph, After Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, the prologue. Next, in 2017, an art show was created titled Invisible Man with art directly inspired by the book. Exhibits included 36 public transit train seats colored black, alluding to real black figures such as Rosa Parks and the segregation of black and white bodies in many aspects of life. It also included a deconstructed drinking fountain that released water into a hole in the floor every 2.5 minutes, alluding to segregated drinking fountains, and a whole theory by Pope L that stated that what cannot be seen is what people most like to see. Invisible Man has even graced the world of theater, with the book being adapted into a play.
The point now is I found a home, or a hole in the ground. Call me Jack the Bear, for I am in a state of hibernation. My hole is warm and full of light. In my basement hole, there are exactly 1,369 lights. I've wired the entire ceiling, every inch of it, an act of sabotage. I've already begun to wire the walls. When I finish all 4 walls, I'm gonna start on the floor. I doubt that there's a brighter spot in all New York than this hole of mine, and I do not exclude Broadway. I now can see the darkness of lightness. I love light. Perhaps it seems strange that an invisible man should need light, desire light, love light. Maybe it's exactly because I'm invisible. I myself, having existed some 20 years, did not become alive until I discovered my invisibility. I have 1 radio phonograph, but I plan to have 5. When I have music, I want to feel its vibrations, not only with my ears, but with my whole body. I want to hear 5 recordings of Louis Armstrong playing and singing "What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue," all at the same time. I like Louis Armstrong. He's made poetry out of being invisible. Invisibility gives one a slightly different sense of time. And you're never quite on the beat. You sink into the breaks and you look around and wait patiently for the other voices to speak. I not only enter the music, but descend, like Dante, into its depths.
Even today, the book still faces relative backlash, this time in the form of censorship. In Randolph County, North Carolina, the book was banned from school libraries after high school juniors were asked to read a book over the summer, with one of the choices being Invisible Man. An angry mother decided to create a 12-page complaint citing its lack of innocence, language, and sexual content, and school board members voted 5-2, with one member saying that the book lacked literary value. However, even with all the criticism Invisible Man has received, it has certainly shaped the topic of racism in our culture. Immediately upon its release, people were influenced by the book's ideas and considered it groundbreaking. The book tackled new ideas and opened up new conversations. Even 70 years later, the book still remains relevant.